I have many siblings, 6 in total, and we would always, after evening prayer, sit down to eat something before bed. And that Tuesday night was no different. We sat eating warm soup and biscuits when suddenly, we all heard loud boots coming up the apartment stairs. After a while, somebody banged on the door. My dad made a huge mistake. It was dark outside except for the little fluorescent stair light, but still, without looking at the people, he went and opened the door without even knowing who it was. As soon as he opened it, my dad screamed and tried to shut it again. The man was very tall with a black hoodie, and we saw something sticking from his side. It was a gun. The man stuck his leg in the door to stop it from being able to shut, and the whole time he was screaming in his drunk and rough voice, "Open the door. I know you have Scott in here. Scott, I'll get you." My 4 sisters and my mom ran to the back room, and I jumped on the table, yelling out of sheer shock. My brother ran to the kitchen and grabbed a knife and peeked out. My dad managed to slam the door and lock it, with the man still throwing his huge body against the laminate door. My dad's face was sweating and he was panting. He's not a big man, and I don't know how he managed to keep that door shut. He ran to his office and called the police. The operator answered and she told us that the man had been in a hit and run and suspected that we had Scott in our house. The thing was, the man lived in our apartment, and I was always careful when I saw his huge monster truck driving slowly around the complex. Up till today, my buddies always talk about it and wonder what would have happened if the man got in and what he planned to do. I'm a 14-year-old female and I go on bike rides every day, sometimes even multiple times a day. And usually what I'll see an older guy walking his dog. I usually bike past him, but today, I said his dog was beautiful and then went on with my ride. 15 minutes later, when the sun had set, I ran into him again in front of his house, and he said something to me, but I couldn't hear him because I had headphones in. I took them out and asked if he could repeat what he said, and he told me it. We started talking a bit and he asked me where I go to school, and I told him like an idiot. Then a little bit later he asked where I lived, and I told him my street, and then he asked what grade I was in, and I said 8th, so then he asked if I was 13 and I said that I was 14. Eventually at some point I was standing, I don't know why, but then he pointed out that I was pretty tall for my age. Later on at some point he pointed out the 2 dogs I have, and said that he saw kids my age go into the woods to go to the mall near us. Spoiler alert, there's no mall in that direction. I eventually got away by saying that my mom wanted me home. I know this might not be the craziest thing, but at the time, it freaked me out. It was a Tuesday evening in February 1989. The steel-gray clouds had now smothered any remaining moonlight, and evening fell along with any warmth. I could feel the chill in my bones as I paced briskly, with my hands tucked firmly in my pockets. Breaking down on a back road to the middle of nowhere was not how I planned my evening. I turned one last time before disappearing around a bend to see the orange hazards blinking back at me, in the knowledge that Diane was at least in some comfort, waiting for me to return with help. I had left the heater on for her, but it wouldn't be long before that diminished on a flat battery. A slim cut and low sky bled a thin orange line as the sun set low, and only the tall silhouette of trees on either side of the road peered down at me like angry gods. It was only my 5th date with Diane, but it was everything that I hoped it would be. I just hoped this inconvenience had not altered her opinion of me. I had walked a good 2 miles now when the cold had made camp on my face. It was eerily quiet as well, with just the nocturnal noises of wildlife bellowing around the woods on either side of me. I picked up the pace and I could feel my lungs burning with each quick but long stride. I then came to a crest and sprinted to the top like it was the top of a mountain. But as I reached the summit, my hopes were crushed. I stopped to get my breath and rested my hands on my knees as I peered into the void. There were no lights anywhere on the horizon, and as far as I could make out, it was another 3 miles of back road to God knows where. Crap! I yelled at the top of my lungs and my voice echoed around the woods. I hope Diane isn't too cold, were my thoughts now. 2 hours ago, we were sat by an open fire in a village pub, sipping wine and whispering conversations that gave me butterflies, like young love does. And now here I was running in the dark with no clue where I was heading. I needed a phone, I needed some warmth, but most of all I just wanted this evening to be over. I checked my watch. 11:55. Maybe I could just return to the car and wait until morning. At least I would have some company. I turned around and peered back, but there was no sign of the blinkers. I knew that I had gone too far now, but somehow, looking back made me feel some sense of comfort. I carried on, muttering to myself about how stupid I felt about breaking down, playing each moment minute by minute, and wondering if I missed a sound, a mechanical sound, something that I ignored. And to make things worse, I had no tools in the car. You idiot, Carl. I tried to keep a brisk pace, but my lungs had other ideas and my nose was leaking halfway down my face from the cold. It was then that I heard a familiar noise behind me. I turned to see headlights flickering through the woods, and my hopes were suddenly raised to the point that I had forgotten how cold I actually felt. I positioned myself as far into the road as I dare in the hope of getting their attention, and I waved my extended arm. The car slowed, much to my relief, and pulled alongside. A man in a dark-colored BMW drew down his window and smiled at me. "You look like you need a lift, lad," he said. I nodded quickly. "Oh, you're a lifesaver, thank you," I smiled back. "Hop in then," he said. He was a middle-aged man, I guessed about mid-40s with graying hair, clean-shaven with a corporate look about him. Certainly, he was well-tailored in a dark suit. Maybe he's a salesman, I thought. He certainly looked the type. I nestled into the black leather seat and immediately felt the warm air surround me like a well-needed blanket. I then thought about Diane, alone in my car with the temperature dropping with each minute. I delayed in getting help. I wanted him to hurry up and drive off, but he was bent on engaging in conversation at the side of the road. "Thanks for stopping by. It's been a bit of a nightmare tonight," I explained, moving my hand towards the heater. "Is that your Ford Escort that I passed a few miles back?" he asked, pointing behind him. I nodded. "Yes, a dang thing broke down on me. Couldn't have been the main road. Oh no, that would have been too convenient." I grinned. Breaking down is never convenient in my book. I turned to the driver and asked, "Did you happen to see my girlfriend in the car as you drove past?" I asked, anxious for a reply. "Yeah, there was somebody in the passenger seat, yes." I felt a small sense of relief. The driver extended a hand. "I'm Victor Mace," he said. I shook his hand. It was a sight warmer than mine. Victor turned to me, his arm resting on the wheel. "You're lucky I took the shortcut tonight. Usually I stick to the main road, but I'm late tonight and figured this road would kill off a good 7 miles. I nodded with a smile, but inside I was yelling, "Go, I haven't got all night." But how can I be rude to the one person who might actually save me tonight, and quite possibly save my relationship? I looked at my watch as a subtle cue as to my urgency. but unfortunately it went unnoticed. "So how come you're out this late on a road like this?" he asked me, more chit-chat that I didn't need. I cleared my throat and felt my hands rubbing the tops of my jeans in anxiety, willing the car to go. "Oh, we went to the village pub just off the A397, and I took a wrong turn but figured if I carry on, it would eventually meet up with the main road," I told him. Victor shook his head at me. "No, it won't," he replied. "Oh, so where does this road go then?" I asked, but inside I didn't give a crap if I went to Timbuktu as long as I get to a house or a farm to call for help. "Over the moors," he replied. "You looking for a phone then, lad?" Yes, I am, so I can call someone out." I pointed straight ahead. "So if you just drive until we find a house or a garage, I would really appreciate it. I just don't want to leave my girlfriend in the car too long," I replied nervously. Victor set off, much to my relief. "I've got a phone at home you can use if you like. It's about a 20-minute drive. I can also offer you a hot drink and return you to your car." "Thanks, if it's not too much trouble, that's very kind," I replied, and now we were making headway, I felt some obligation to make conversation. "So, what keeps you out this late on a Tuesday evening?" I asked. Victor turned to me. "Work. Just work." "Ah, okay, what is it that you do?" I asked, curiously. Victor hooked eyes with me before returning them to the road, still bleak and without light. "You warm enough, lad?" he asked, ignoring my last question. "I can turn up the heat some more if you'd like." "Thanks, but I'm all good now," I replied. I tried again at making conversation. At the end of the day here, I was in the middle of nowhere in a car with a total stranger, and I found myself fidgeting in the chair mainly out of some sense of anxiety. "I had you down as a salesman. I think it's the suit. I'm a freelance photographer, so casual is my go-to attire," I joked. Victor said nothing. He just smiles across at me and returns his attention to the road. I felt my left hand caressing the leather bolster and my eyes searching the door for the latch. My brain was trying to calculate the chances of surviving a fall at this speed if I were to open the door for a quick getaway. I was beginning to feel the full weight of what real paranoia felt like, and I didn't like the taste that I looked down to my right to where the seatbelt was anchored. How quickly could I disconnect the seatbelt, open the door, and roll out? I've seen it a million times in the movies, but it seemed 1,000 times scarier in real life. "Oh, stop being silly," I told myself. He's obviously just a private person. But somehow I found myself asking more questions. "Will your family be up at this hour?" Victor turned to me again. "I don't have a family. I live alone. Much prefer it that way, lad," he replied. I decided to withdraw from any further questions and settled into the seat with my thoughts again, turning to Diane alone in the car. It had been an hour now, and I was anxious to return to her as soon as possible. But then my eyes fell on his keys swinging from the ignition barrel. I hadn't noticed it before. A small photo key ring and a blue unicorn toy. It was a strange thing to have for a man with no family. My curiosity was now like a naughty child seeking attention and difficult to ignore. So to that end, I had to make an excuse to use the interior light. "Do you mind if I switch the light on for a second? I think that I may have gotten oil on my best shirt when I was trying to fix the car. My girlfriend will freak." I laughed, lying through my teeth. "Sure," he replied coldly with no reciprocal or jovial comment. I flicked the interior light on for a moment, pretending to check my shirt tails, but my eyes were firmly fixed on the swinging keychain with the unicorn toy. I only had a small window of opportunity where the interior light and the angle of the photo key ring were aligned to the point where I could see it clearly. It was the headshot of a middle-aged couple on a tropical beach. Somewhere in between them stood a young girl of about 3 or 4. But then as the key ring swung around to the momentum of the car, I grabbed a glimpse of the writing on the back. Jackson's Bar, Barbados. My eyes were then drawn to something in my footwell which I hadn't noticed in the dark. A white envelope with an address that was not even in the same county. Even more unnerving was the name on the envelope, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds. Something felt very wrong. I couldn't help myself but ask an obvious question. You travel much? I then followed it up with another lie. I get to travel to some nice places in my work. The Caribbean is just incredible. You ever been? Victor left his eyes on the road and replied, Nope. I had a gut feeling and an urgency to probe some more. You have any children? I would like to have kids one day, I said nervously. Nope, Victor replied. By now, my gut feeling had transcended it to full-on fear. I could feel my heart beating in my throat and couldn't shake the feeling that this somehow was not his car. My thoughts turned once more to jumping out, and my paranoia played tricks on me. Victor then slowed the car and turned into a narrow drive off the back road. It was a small, red brick bungalow surrounded by an abundance of overgrown shrubs and bushes. An exterior light flicked on and bathed the front in a yellow tinge. This was not a well-kept property. The large front windows were obscured from sheets of newspaper stuck to the inside, faded and yellowed. Victor undid his seatbelt. Wait here, lad, I just need to sort something before you come in. Victor rolled out the car and made his way to the front door. I didn't like this at all. My body screamed, Get out of here. But out of fight, flight or freeze, my body was firmly locked in freeze. But then I turned to the back seat and saw the one thing that convinced me this was definitely not his car. A baby seat. I didn't even want to try and imagine why he had this car. All I knew now was that I couldn't step one foot in that place for fear that it would be my last. I glanced across and saw the key still in the ignition. Adrenaline hit me like a junkie's fix. If I don't make a move now, I never will. I shot a look to the front door, still ajar, and leapt across to the driver's seat, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the keys. I started the ignition and hit reverse, spinning off into the middle of the road before slamming it into first. I laughed hard, but it was a nervous laugh and nothing remotely humorous about the situation that I had just avoided. My hands were shaking hard and the adrenaline had sent me into a state of shock. I headed back as fast as I dared back toward Diane. By now the wintered sky had gave way to sleet which danced in the headlights like sparkly diamonds. My eyes were fixed on the rearview mirror expecting a set of lights to give chase. But why would they? There was no other vehicle on the drive. I thumped the wheel. Screw you, I yelled with tears falling down my face. I had a plan. Pick up Diane, go home, and in the morning I would visit the police station. But as my mind circled with 1,000 thoughts, the car suddenly jerked to the right and I fought the steering, narrowly missing the thick hedgerow at the side of the road. I sprung out of the driver's seat and gazed in frustration at the flat tire. Crap, I yelled again. I figured it was only 2 or 3 miles away from Victor. I had a choice. Limp back to my car with the flat or change it here. I figured I would take my chances and fix it here. That way me and Diane could just head straight home. I pulled the keys from the ignition and popped the boot for the spare. The whole time I was changing the tire, I kept looking behind me in fear that the man would be following me. But luckily it never came. I made it back to Diane and we were able to make it to safety that night.